Okay, should we get started? Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we're going to try to end hadith number 16 today, our kind of discussion on it. If people want to pull it up, we've been looking at this hadith for a few weeks. Right now, we're going to try to go into particulars on the latter part of it that says La taghdab, do not get angry. But as we're kind of exploring that, to recap a bit on some of what we discussed last time, we talked about anger in a few different frames, blameworthy anger, righteous anger, and justifiable anger. I think were like some of the things we discussed. We talked about the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. We talked about Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, the Hadith al-Ifk. Do people remember any of what I'm saying right now? Right? Yeah. And the week before, we talked about just the first part of the Hadith. That's the Prophet being asked for advice and counsel, right? Al-Sini, like, give me advice. And what does that mean? To be someone who seeks advice, has the willingness to take advice and help as much as offering advice. And so today we wanted to look at kind of the end part of the hadith, La taghdab, and talk a little bit about what that means, as well as look at different narrations in the hadith that speak about anger in particular, and how we can kind of extrapolate meaning for that for ourselves. So maybe just to start off, if somebody can read the hadith, the Arabic, the English. This is hadith number 16 in the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, and then we'll kind of go from there. Does anybody want to read? You can read either or. It doesn't have to be both and.
16.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've read it wrong. A man said to the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, counsel me. So he, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, do not become angry. The man repeated his request for counsel several times. And each time, he, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, do not become angry. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رجلا قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصني قال لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب.
Jazakallah khair. Are you the first person to ever read the Arabic in English? Right?
Sorry?
I don't know if most people read the Arabic and the English. Does that happen? Ever? I feel like we should give you an award of some kind.
I'll let you know. I think of it.
You're gonna decide what the award is for yourself? Is that how it works? I've definitely gotten awards in my life, and no one has asked me what I want them to be. But now I'm gonna put that as a condition going forward if I ever get another award. Okay, great. So one of the things that we want to start to kind of look at are the particulars of why the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning this as the advice. The companion could have asked anything, or be responded to with anything, right? Al-Sini, like, give me advice. And the response could have been in any frame of kind of counsel. But the Prophet ﷺ, in very concise terminology, speaks to something that, in terms of a generalization, a lot of us probably wrestle with: the capacity to kind of be in control of oneself. Is a very unique capacity, right? If I exert strength over you, somebody might think about that as actual power. Do you know? And that's not necessarily a thing that demonstrates true, like, strength. So my 9-year-old weighs like 67 pounds. Do you know what I mean? If I literally, like, can hold him to the ground, right? I am like more than twice his weight, almost thrice his weight, that's not a sign of strength. The actual control of someone else alone, especially where there's an opportunity for there to be imbalance in that. Do you see what I mean? If my son was 3 times my like size and I could hold him down, you can say, well, that's probably impressive. Do you know? Um, but what our tradition teaches us a lot is not about the control of the other as much as how the control of oneself is a true sign of strength, you know? So controlling someone else, can be indicative of power in some capacity, but the ability to control myself, that's real strength, right? And when we have hadith that tell us things like the strong believer is not one who could wrestle one to the ground, but the strong believer is one who can control themselves in a moment of anger, right? A moment where emotions get very kind of heavy. And the manifestation, a lot of those emotional states can seemingly be depicted as anger, do you know? And we can extrapolate in our own reflection, like, well, what is it that catalyzes this within me, right? Somebody put their anger in my heart, someone mistreated me, someone hurt me, someone harmed me. I was fasting all day and I got really hungry and then angry as a result of that. I didn't have my coffee in the first couple of days of Ramadan. It wasn't easy for me to not smoke all day, right? I don't drink coffee or smoke, by the way, just so you know. I'm not saying me in particular. It was not easy for me to smoke. But, you know, understanding like substances and the deprivation of it can contribute to it. But fundamentally, I still have a responsibility in some accord for the actions that stem from my like behaviors, whether they are controlled, erratic, or otherwise. Do you see what I'm saying? La taghdab is also not something we want to understand simply in a vacuum. So these hadith, we want to see how they have connections to each other. So the hadith that's before this was which one? Do you remember? Hadith number 15. We talked about it for like a month and a half. What's the hadith? Hadith number 15. You're nodding your head. What is it?
It is those who believe in Allah and the last day, not, I don't know the specific words, but it's speak well, speak heard, or be silent.
Good. Let's pause there, right? How does that relate to this? من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whosoever believes in Allah on the last day, let them speak good or be silent, right? How do we understand these hadith in connection to each other? Do you know? You don't want to take bits and pieces of information and not see how they can create prisms through which we can understand like new information as we get it, or look at things that we've had access to, but now through a different vantage point, right? So if we were to put these two hadith in conversation with each other, whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let them speak good or be silent. And then this hadith of do not get angry. What is the connection between speaking good and being silent and do not get angry? Does the question make sense? So just some more people have trickled in. If we can turn the people around us, share some names. How do we put these two hadith in conversation with each other? Like speak good and be silent and do not get angry. What's the connection point there, if any, or the many connection points? Let's talk about it a bit so we can just kind of get talking, and then we'll come back and discuss. But go ahead. If you don't know names of people, just exchange names. Yeah.
You know it gets you angry. So yes. It shows what you know.
Like, okay, so if we put these two hadith in conversation with each other, like, how do we make sense of this? Speak good or be silent. Do not get angry. Is there any connections that we can make here? What do we discuss? Yeah.
When you're angry, it's so easy for not good words to come out of your mouth. So Allah said, like, so either speak good or just don't say anything at all.
Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah.
And the thing that connects both of them is control within yourself, like how you react to them, and just control.
Control. Yeah. I'm
Also
so.
about mindfulness, and those two of these are something I think of often, and I relate them to, once you say something, you can't ever take it back, because the condition of whatever you've said, like it's just in people's mind, wherever it is, it's out there in the world. Versus if it had just stayed in your mind, no one would know except for you and Allah. But once you say it, you just can't take it back, especially if you're angry.
Okay. What's going on, like, when you're in a state of anger, that the words are just coming out and they're just not, as you said so eloquently, like, these are bad words coming out of my mouth. Like, why? Why does that happen?
I think maybe because in the heat of the moment, like you're not thinking. I don't know. You're just not thinking straight. You just want to express what's inside you. Um, but then it's important to think and reflect before you say something. Kind of going back to the brother who's talking about the sense of control, just controlling yourself and taking a moment to breathe, or recentering yourself. Um,
But why is that important? Like, why can't I just say whatever I feel like whenever I feel like it? Yeah.
Because you're saying it to someone or like to other people around you, so it's not only if you may be hurting others or you're kind of like going into the territory of other people, so you need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And I think also it's kind of like the opposite. You become like if you're upset, like if you're standing up and you're upset, like sit down, or if you're sitting down and you sit down. Like if you start speaking and like spouting negative words out, it's only going to elevate your anger and your rage, and it may reach a point where you're not able to turn off yourself and come like bring yourself down. And if you're speaking these negative words to, let's say, people who maybe are not trying to be grounded in some of these Islamic practices, then they're only going to encourage you to continue elevating like those negative thoughts. And then who knows what you do next? Like if you put those words out there, that's only going to feed into action. And then if you do something with your hands, like again, like although it's not words, like you can't take the words back. If you physically do something, you can't take that damage back.
Yeah. So now I can start to think about it in terms of steps, right? I have a specific. There's not a person in this room who could say they haven't gotten irrationally angry before, or emotions have not caused them to irrationally speak into themselves or others words that are damaging, right? And we can say, well, like it's very obvious why you don't want to do this. It'll hurt somebody, do you know? But then people do it all the time. The absence of conscious thought in this mode. Innamal amalu bin niyat is the first hadith that we looked at in this hadith collection. So how do these hadiths speak to each other, right? The amal is different from the fa'il. How did we say it was different? Like the amal and the fa'il. They both mean act. What's one of the main differences between a fa'il and an amal? This was like a year plus ago. Yeah.
Fa'al is the person who does the act, and fa'al is the act.
No, amal and fa'il.
Amal is like work, like the thing that's being done.
Don't translate the word.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
What's the difference between the two words?
Nia,
Huh?
is it the invention?
How?
One of them has Nia, the other has.
Yeah, exactly. One of them is done with consciousness. That's the amal. When you're doing it without consciousness, then that's the fa'il. Do you understand? Right? And the act that the hadith is talking about is the amal. Do you see what I mean? Right? But we just said a part of this is I'm doing it without thinking. Do you know? It's not necessarily that you're doing it without thinking as much as where your thoughts are taking you is not where you're at in the moment. And they're taking you to a flood of other thoughts you've never reconciled before. And you're more overtly exerted now in an inundation of thoughts and experiences that if you don't start to heal from them, they're going to continue to create harm to others and to you. The anger that is unjustifiable or blameworthy is giving you an indication of what's going on. Because we looked last week at indications within the companions' lives where they got upset, but nobody reprimanded them for getting upset. The verses did not say in the aftermath of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The verses in Surah An-Nur did not say in the aftermath of Hadith al-Ifk, right? That, oh, Aisha, why did you turn your back on the Prophet and your parents? Do you know? She was upset, and her upsettedness made sense, as well as the actions in relations to the upsettedness. What we're saying here is there's times when my anger does not make any sense in the way that I'm reacting to it. And one of the ways that I could tell that my reaction is problematic is the way that the words are flowing out of my mouth. They're evidence in and of themselves of a data point that this thing is in control of me and I'm not in control of it. And it can get to a place where it's that much more detrimental, but whose heart is being hurt? Not just the recipient of my anger, but my heart is also being damaged. And I have to be comfortable in telling myself that when I'm acting on the anger, even if it was placed in me, not by my volition. Someone did wrong to me, someone hurt me. I deserve to not have this reaction come from me. And the more I double down on it and give it a sense of justification, which is different from an explanation of what its roots are. I could feel so much pain because of pain people have hurt me with. But if I then take that pain and hurt my child as a result of it, would you tell me that's okay? If I said to you, when I was younger, my dad did this and my mom did this, and this girl really broke my heart and did this, and this didn't work out and that didn't work out, and that's why you saw me raise my hand against my child, God forbid. But if you would say that it's not okay for you to take the justifications and explanations of the pain inside of you to then validate consequently your ill treatment of somebody else, then I'm going to tell you also that it's not okay when you're doing that to somebody too. And if you're giving yourself reasons that become band-aids, but also obstacles to the contentment that you're entitled to. Do you see? And a part of that is seeing the words we speak into ourselves, but the words after the fact as well, that can give us indication, is this a healthy manifestation of this thing or an unhealthy manifestation of it? And being silent becomes important so that I can gather myself as a technique in anger management in our tradition and remove myself from the environment that's causing me to exert now unconscious modes of thoughtfulness or lack thereof. Do you get what I mean? Because the goal is not to think, everybody thinks. The goal is to reclaim capacity on what we think about and how we choose to think about the things that we think about. And there's some spaces where I just run on autopilot and then I start waterfalling the people I'm talking to with all kinds of stuff. And I say a bunch of things, not realizing the trade-off is my unhealthy expression of emotion is going to inevitably hurt someone else and is still hurting me back. La taghdab. Do you get what I mean? So when Ali radiallahu an gets up in the instance we talked about last time from his sword on someone's throat and that man spits in his face and he leaves from the situation, and he says, what are you doing? And he says, if I did this, it would now not be for the sake of the divine, but out of my own anger, right? What's he got to do to be able to reclaim balance? He removes himself from the situation. Do you get what I mean? Think about when you fight with someone. Has anybody ever said to you, we need to stop the conversation now before it gets out of hand, and you keep going with the conversation? Why? And it's not about a good or a bad. If you beat yourself up, you're giving shaitan victory over you. Spiritual growth is not possible unless there's something to improve upon. And this emotion, when it is irrational and unjustifiable, becomes the gateway to a ton of different problems. Harnessing it is hard because the nafs nature is laziness and it wants you to do what's easier even if it's not better. And being negative is easier than being positive. It takes a lot of energy to see like what is there versus what is not there. I mean, conversations don't make sense because of the anger I interjected into it. How many times was I irrationally upset that I hurt someone's feelings or made every excuse for why it was okay for me to do to them? The bigger consequence here is one of ultimate divine judgment. As a wake-up call, you pay attention to the signs your heart, your mind, your body are giving to you. Just because I feel it, that doesn't make it enough for it to be true. And it's not only that I've lost consciousness and I'm not thinking, I'm just thinking indirectly about all the other stuff that's sitting in my head. And at some level, I'm going to have to try to heal from it or confront it because it's permeating other relationships that I have. As a 42-year-old man, who's not the oldest in the room, but definitely not the youngest, it doesn't get easier when you get older. There's two phases of life where you can fundamentally do whatever you want, and it doesn't matter. When you're really little and you can just whatever, and when you're really old, like people like old people, they just say whatever they feel like. When you're in the middle of all of it, you got to always be tempered, or like, what will somebody say? Or what will they think? Why are you laughing so hard? Huh?
It's real what you're saying.
What were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, it's very relatable.
Yeah, right? Old people and babies, they can say whatever they want to, and that's pretty much it. Do you know? Everybody in the middle of it, you don't get to just say whatever you feel like, and you stomach it, and then it's got to come out in some place. Do you see what I mean? But if you got all this stuff that you haven't really allowed for yourself to process, it's going to come out at inopportune times. And then you're going to get scared about the things you think about. And this, by extension, is like a process that we want to start to implement. So I'm not subservient to my thoughts in an unhealthy way. Just because I'm feeling it, that doesn't in and of itself make what it's calling me towards like real alone. It doesn't mean I'm delusional, do you know? But it can get to a place where there's a lot of other things that are coming in the way. So as we extrapolate from the hadith, things that we can do, what does Ali radiallahu anh do? He removes himself from the situation. As hard as it is, sometimes the best thing to do in the moment is let the person end the conversation, or you have the wherewithal to know of yourself that you say, I got to put a boundary not on you, but on me. That I know if this keeps going, I'm going to turn into a version of myself that doesn't make any sense. Do you see? And retributive anger is a toxic anger. You did this to me, I'm going to do this back to you. Why is it okay for me to do this to you? Well, you did this to me. No, remember who your teacher is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't treat people based off of who they were. He treated people based off of who he was, right? So here, like that swallowing, wal-kadhimin al-ghayth that we talked about last time, right? In Surah Al Imran, that you swallow the ghayth so it doesn't come out as ghadab. Do you know? It comes out in a more healthy way. I want us to look at Surah Shura. If you pull up, it's the 42nd chapter of the Quran, and starting from its 36th verse, it gives a list of people and characteristics of people who are defined as being people who are like good people. There's a lot of lists like this in the Quran. Surah Al-Mu'minun gives us this list, right? When certain verses are being identifying certain characteristics, right? ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It says right in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, and then it describes the muttaqin. May Allah make us from amongst them, and gives them characteristics, right? So here we have a list of characteristics. We want to think about them aspirationally. You don't want to think about them in a self-deprecating mode, and one of them is relevant to anger. Does anybody have this? The 42nd chapter of the Quran, starting from verse 36, if we can read like 36 to 39. Or some of the verses after too. Yeah, go ahead. You can keep going. That's great. You can stop there. Does anybody want to read the English?
Whatever pleasure you have been given is no more than a fleeting enjoyment of this worldly life. What is with God is far better and more lasting for those who believe and put their trust in their Lord. Am I reading the right one?
Yeah.
Okay. Who avoid major sins and shameful deeds and forgive when anger. Who respond to their Lord, establish prayer, conduct their affairs by mutual consultation, and donate from what we have provided for them. course justice when wrong.
Great. So, right in the 37th verse, it says very clearly, right? And forgive when angered. And it has this word, ghadab, in it. وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. That when they are angered, they engage in maghfirah. Forgiveness and anger quite often get kind of placed next to each other, right? And there's reasons for this. Why do you think that is the case? So, if we can kind of turn to the persons next to us, why do you think anger and forgiveness kind of get placed next to each other? Uh, and here it's being identified as a praiseworthy characteristic, the ability to forgive when angered. So, how do these two things connect to each other? If we can turn to the persons next to us, uh, what's the relationship between these two things? Why does anger and forgiveness kind of get connected? Let's discuss, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Just like forgiveness is like that. Yeah, it's like it's just like you saying something. You don't get along. Like maybe like it'll like change your mind. Like doing something nice versus forgiving what forgiving the cause of but forgiving the trigger of it. No. Forgive no. It's like this no we say whatever we have it's like it's a sure it's a process. Not like a catastrophe. Putting blinders on. Not worth it.
Or that's important for me. I guess psychologically, I don't know what it would be like to see them do, but I know that's at all. And then if you grow and you're like people, you know, might not be sorry, might not actually be fully acknowledged. It's very easy to have righteous anger, especially when the other person is like really but like it's like when you do something like you don't put a single one of expecting the other person to take all and you're doing it just for and that's just more that's all. So if you're forgiving, you have conversations with the person you're forgiving, or that they even like actually like any context of religious figures in your life. I think is the idea. But not scary. It's like why? The idea that it's hard. It's super hard to
So the word
Okay, so what's the relationship here? Right, the verse is talking about ghadab, and it's talking about when you will get angry. Right, so when you have the word idha utilized in the Quran, you know, you could translate it as if potentially, but it's really saying when. Like it's gonna happen inevitably. You're gonna get angered. To be human is to be emotional, and anger is an emotion that comes up. So here, like the verse is giving us this connection point now and pairing anger with magfirah, right? Like why? What's the connection between these two things? Why does this come up in this way? What do we discuss? Yeah.
I was telling the people I was talking to earlier, anger and forgiveness complement each other because forgiveness it like bombs and like it's like putting like salve over anger before the anger scabs into like resentment and like deeper seated issues until it like fully blows up and becomes like way worse.
For who?
For like all the parties involved, the angry person, when you hold in a lot of emotions, actually, when you hold in like really stressful feelings such as like anger and like resentment, it like messes with your cortisol levels and it like causes like physically when you're like mentally like angry or you're always like frustrated with something, it like I guess I'm like looking at it from like the physiological point of view.
But you should. Allah is the one that created us, right? So these things become like intrinsically wired in us. Do you know what I mean? So what does cortisol do to you when it's too much in your body?
And like I know that the stress hormone, so essentially if there's too much of it, you're always on like your system is basically fried on like fight or flight mode, and that's not like and that's why it causes a lot of autoimmune issues for people.
It's bad.
Like, let me calm down before that happens.
Yeah, right? So here there's this connection, anger and forgiveness of everything that we're saying. You were going to say something?
I was just gonna add on how there's this clip I watched of someone explaining how the emotions that you're feeling, it's not like the other person can feel that for you. It's like you're the only one that's feeling that. So if you're feeling anger towards a situation or something or whatever it is, that person can't necessarily that situation that they don't necessarily feel what you're feeling. It's all internal. So you're throwing the anger back at yourself. So that's what I was thinking. Just a random thought.
Other thoughts? Any connections between this thing? Like, why do we think of forgiveness when we think of anger? Or why is it paired together? This is Quran, right? Like, so there's nothing without meaning in Allah's plan, Allah's book. So why is he putting forgiveness and anger together as like a hallmark characteristic? Yeah.
The teacher was saying how, like, when is the attribute of the other? So how, like, in the Quran, there's a comparison. For example, like, when Allah talks about hellfire, there's also comparison to how, like, their story is. So similar to that kind of thing. Forgiveness is like the attribute of.
Yeah. So here, like if we put all these things together, it's going to ruin your inside if you hold on to it in an unhealthy way. But the person that transgressed against you is not meant to be the benefactor of your forgiveness. Like you are meant to be the benefactor of your forgiveness. The reconcilement of it enables the person who wronged you to no longer have control over you. And that forgiveness is an important thing to understand because when it's held on to, it comes up in all of these other modes. And you could be fighting with someone, and while you're fighting with them, you're actually fighting with 5 other people at the same time. And then I get into my head where it has this kind of self perpetuating damage because I'm in a place where, like, the wrong that was done to me, it becomes exponential. And I'm trying to talk to someone who asked me a simple question and it catalyzes and triggers me into all kinds of stuff. And that person's left wondering, what did I do? And I'm here now. And instead of really engaging the one who hurt me, I'm engaging those that I never really had the ability to engage with in the first place. Do you see what I mean? And who's going to miss out the most is going to be me. Like I'm not really in a place where I found the healing that I needed. And that's going to be hard if I believe in a skewed understanding of what forgiveness is, that it means something like I have to go be best friends with a person who hurt me. No, like you don't. Forgiveness is not about forgetting, but forgiveness is for the forgiver. And you allow for yourself to say, I don't want this person to exert this control over me any longer. And I'm going to heal. The steps that come after will be varied. There's no one formula that allows for it, but step number one has to be that I want that for myself. It's very easy to get to a place where the consequences of it now start to get manipulated by shaitan, and I start to hate myself the way I act with people based off of what it was that was done to me. Do you see? I don't like that I'm always so agitated and frustrated, or that I lose my cool or my temper, or I start to behave in these ways, right? And shaitan is adding layers of negativity to it. So when I start to think about one thing, I start thinking about 5 different things. The other point to this that you want to understand is when you are hurting somebody and it stays with them, our tradition is built on the idea that if you are the one that introduces a good act into someone's life, every time they act on that, you get ajr for it. You didn't have to be the originator of the act, right? Someone comes and takes their shahada with us to today. Wait a second. I'm just thinking someone's coming to actually take their shahada. Somebody comes and takes their shahada today, and then you taught them how to say salams, assalamu alaikum, right? Every time they say salams, you get part of the ajr for this, because that's what our religion teaches us. That's just how it worked. But also, if you are the reason why someone acts on something that is not good, every time they do that, it's coming back to you. So if you put that pain in someone's heart and it's the cause of their misactions, and you got away with it, this is why power and strength are 2 different things. Just because I can physically hold my 60-pound child down, that's not a sign of strength. Strength is about me controlling me. And if you don't have the self-control to apologize when you've wronged somebody, this is like the basis of ego in our tradition. You have a prophet who made istighfar 70 times a day. What is he even seeking forgiveness for? You know? But he's still doing it, right? And you got to fear Allah. Like you hurt someone and got away with it in a worldly sense, that doesn't mean you get away with it in an otherworldly sense. Do you see what I mean? And we have hadith where the Prophet tells like his companions, he tells his wife, you could say a word, not thinking anything of it, and it's the reason you get plunged into Jahannam. May Allah protect us from it, right? Because it can spur people into behavior that you are consequently dealing with all of it for years and years to come. And they're going to come on the day of judgment. Why did you do all of this mess? Well, that guy is the one that talked to me poorly when I was younger and never admitted what they did was wrong. Do you get what I'm saying? And understanding how anger works with other people allows for us to then think out, why do I not want to lay the seeds of something that potentially will create accountability back to me? Does that make sense? So here, Allah is putting this together. Forgiveness is your right, not your responsibility, but you're also responsible with what comes after as best as we can understand. Allah is going to judge in his individual judgment. I don't know what that's going to look like for me, let alone for any of us. Allah grant us Jannah without any judgment. But don't roll the dice on it. Find the healing you need. And if you are a key variable to someone else's healing, get over yourself. And acknowledge and understand that the way that it's tough is the nafs is getting in the way, shaitan is getting in the way. Just because no one can hold you accountable in this world, you want to think about that. And you don't want to become that person. There's hadith that speak about like people who the Prophet tells us to be mindful of and wary of, that there's no point in giving them advice, because they're just going to get upset at every single thing that you say. And that's not you winning an argument. That's that you're so argumentative and so upset all the time that nobody thinks there's any point, that you're not going to ever change. And if you buy into that nonsense that you can't change, you're going to then still have the accountability after the fact. Do you know what I mean? And there's people that are like this, that they're so allergic to having to acknowledge their capacity to create transgression against somebody that they don't want to take any kind of insight or advice from anyone. May Allah protect us from ever becoming like that. Do you know? And our tradition offers outlets in a lot of different ways. But here, forgiveness is paired with this because it becomes also the antidote for the unhealthy, unjustifiable anger. Hadith al-Ifk shows us how Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha engaged with the accusations of slander. Umar radiallahu an gets agitated at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Alasna bil Muslimin wa laysu bil mushrikeen, right? We talked about this last week. But in the months after, they're still like close to each other. The Prophet and Umar and Abu Bakr and everyone else, they're still friends and companions, right? Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, like she loves the Messenger of God and he loves her. Do you get what I mean? They can have healthy anger amongst themselves, but it's not like anchoring them in a way that they hold it against each other, right? Don't you remember the time you didn't talk to me for 30 days because of this instance of ifk? Don't you remember like how you turned your back on me when I came to you when Surah of Nur was revealed? No, they're not holding these things and weaponizing against each other. But you know how you get to that point? Forgiveness is for me to release the toxicity. Do you understand? If we can go to Surah Al-Araf, it's the 7th chapter of the Quran, verse 154. It speaks about Musa alayhi salam, 7:154. Does anybody have it?
When Moses' anger subsided, he took up the tablets whose text contained guidance and mercy for those who stood in awe of their Lord.
Great. Can somebody read the Arabic? Yeah, go ahead.
ولما سكت عن موسى الغضب أخذ الألواح وفي نسختها هدى ورحمة للذين هم لربهم يرهبون.
Great. Right? Musa alayhi salam is the prophet of God mentioned the most in the Quran. You want to learn his story, not as a story, but there's a reason why he keeps getting mentioned again and again and again. There's a lot that you could take away from this. In this verse, Musa alayhi salam got angry and he waited for his anger to go away before he took his next step, right? Allah is cementing this in Quran. The prophets of God are exemplars for us, right? May Allah make us like them. Musa alayhi salam, the goal is not to pretend like you're a robot. He got angry, he recognized it, and then he took a pause. So the anger was not something that he brought into what it was that was coming after that. Do you see what I'm saying? And this is a praiseworthy characteristic. The idea isn't that my goal is to never be overwhelmed or never be anxious or never be agitated or never be irritated or never be frustrated or never be angry. But what do I allow for it to do to me? And how do I become subservient to it? It is a religion that teaches us to worship God, right? Not to worship our feelings. Do you see what I mean? Just like it's a problem to say, I didn't pray this or that because I wasn't feeling anything in the prayer. You pray because Allah told you to pray, not because you feel something in the prayer, right? In the same way, like you can worship feelings of other kinds and become subservient to them and subjugate yourself to them and let them be the things that then define and dictate how it is that you move forward. And here in Surah Al-A'raf, Musa alayhi salam, he is moving after he's gotten the anger in control. This is one of the interpretations of La Taghdab, Awsini, like give me advice and counsel. La Taghdab, do not get angry, meaning the interpretation is don't let the unhealthy anger define the choices after it's come up. Take the steps to get back to a place of balance and homeostasis. And if a prophet of God who is meant to be from amongst the best of creation is in a place where it's now cemented concretely in Quran to be read until like people engage in this text till the end of time. May Allah make us those who act upon what the Quran teaches us, right? The Prophet Musa is angry and then he lets the anger calm down before he moves next. Do you know what I mean? You ever get upset, man, and you hear something that riles you up? I work with a lot of survivors of abuse. May Allah make it easy for them. And I sit with people who they think they're helping. And the person says, this person hurt me. This person hit me. This person abused me. And then the person who they're unloading that on, their first reaction is, I'm going to go and knock that guy out. I'm going to go and mess them up. I'm going to go and do this and do that. No, like rule number one when you're working with survivors is you follow their lead, right? You listen to what it is that they want for you to do. Some of them do not want the violence that was enacted against them to create more violence. You see? But you can engage in it and absorb it and then be in a place where you think you're acting rightfully, but you're taking the pain and you're not in a place where you're listening empathetically. You're just imposing. Do you see what I mean? If that can happen when you're trying to help someone, what do you think is going to happen if somebody pisses you off? I found out somebody was gossiping about me. I found out somebody did this or that. Retribution, like vengeful anger, surfaces. They did this to me. I'm going to go get this on them in this way. Let me show them who it is that they were messing around with, right? There's opportunity for us to show the world who we are. It doesn't mean we become people's doormats or punching bags. But Shaitan gives continuity to a vice by taking it from one heart and putting it in the next heart. Why does Moses stop after he got angry? Why does he rebalance himself and not act on the anger? And think about how it's talked about. How much do you spit into the world of words because the anxiety, the agitation, the frustration, the emotional angst is so heavy that I'm just letting it all out because I don't know how to tolerate it within myself. It doesn't mean you just be silent, but you speak when it makes sense. Somebody's still recipient of that word, and they have to be in a place where they're open to actually like holding it, and they're the sensible person for you to share it with. Do you see what I mean? So here is another tactic that's Quranic. The anger comes. Musa alayhi salam takes the time to make it subside. It's not going to be what defines and dictates. Who are you to tell me that I X, Y, or Z? Do you get what I mean? Right? And it's like, well, what's coming up? What's defining and identifying these things? Okay, why don't we do this? Because I've been talking for a bit of time. We turn to the persons next to us. What are we taking away from this so far? What's coming up? And then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
Just you work on yourself, and just learn how to find peace within yourself and then
Or like, what is like what is like? No, I don't know. What's the role of the purpose? Like, person is like wrong. But yeah. I feel like once I got a little fuzzy.
Okay. What are some of the things we're talking about? What's coming up for people so far? Maybe we can hear from a few people and then jump into a couple of other things. What are we discussing? I heard everyone talking. Yeah. What are we talking about? What are we taking away so far? You can agree, you can disagree. Yeah.
I was wondering how we understand sort of like this verse and kind of like Musa calming down with sort of like other depictions of the scene where he's like very angry and he like throws the tablets and he like argues with Harun, and kind of like the tension between these two, or how we understand sort of like he is like calming down here, but like really he was like angry, acted on it to some extent.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he was like justifiably angry, or he was like, righteously angry about like telling Israel having done something they shouldn't have, and even when he acted on his anger, he was doing it maybe in like more productive ways.
Or a demonstrated growth also is that you can only know where you stand in relation to a challenge when the challenge surfaces. So if I have something that comes in front of me that is agitating and I don't believe I'll ever overcome it, and then a month later the same thing resurfaces, my growth isn't about not feeling agitated, but how do I respond to it? So in situation X, he responds in one way. In situation Y, he responds in a different way. And enables us to be able to see that we fundamentally can respond circumstantially in different ways at different times. Do you know? And then in certain modes, like the anger is justifiable at the end of the day, how it manifests and what it is that's going to be taking place. And here in this verse, like he's taking up tablets, right? The verse is talking about rahma and huda. Do you know? These aren't things that like kind of have congruence with ghadab. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just all very different things. And to be a vessel that receives as well as articulates, like it's got to be in a place where it understands how this can create metaphysical barriers in some regard. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? We want to start to think now if this thing is getting secreted into our being, like at a level that is physiological. And you got to know how you work. Otherwise, people will continue to manipulate how you work. So, one of the things that la taghdab also means is that you engage in those things that allow for anger to not be like the default mode. Think about when you get angry the most often. You're tired, you're exhausted, you're hungry, you're irritated, you're stressed, you're not sleeping well. Like all those things start to pile up. And you want to be able to understand if you have capacity to respond with those inward reactions, then Allah has also built you in ways that you can purposely and strategically outweigh that with the presence of what is positive. So, for example, we have a lot of different things that function within us that if you take classes with me on leadership at NYU's public policy school, I'll talk about some of these things, at different times. Uh, Literal like releases of chemicals that are meant to create like balance and contentment and happiness, right? So a handful that we'll discuss before Maghrib time. One, like dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that releases like pleasure hormones that's attached to anticipation. This was something like, for example, I'm 5 foot tall, right? Maybe a little taller than 5 foot, but 5 foot tall, let's say. I'm not a tall human being, do you know? So I can be in a place where I'm so stubborn that I'm trying to get something off of the top shelf in my house, and I won't take the stool to get it, but I'll reach and reach as if me just extending my arms will somehow make me taller than I actually am, right? But now it's not even about me getting what's on the shelf. I just want to feel what I will feel by getting it off of the shelf. Do you see? And the anticipation of me actually being successful is now the objective. And then when I get it on my fingertips and like mosey it over to me, and then I catch it in my hand, I feel good. Dopamine jolts come to us in an unhealthy way right now because of devices that we have. Every time you get a text or you send one and you're waiting for it and you are annoyed that someone has not responded to the text, that is the absence of the addictive dopamine jolt you've gotten used to with immediate gratification coming up. And it's not the absence, but the overt presence of it that in between when you're not getting it, it puts you in a bad mood. I need you to engage my social media post. I need you to laugh at what I laughed at. And as soon as I laughed at it, I pulled out a phone and took a picture and shared it with you, as if you're not doing anything else in your world, right? You don't exist only for me to share with you and respond in the moment. People who know how you function better than you know yourself manipulated to make you constantly staring at a device in a way that you're getting these jolts again and again and again, whether you are aware of it or not. That's what the dopamine is attached to, the joy that comes from anticipation. And they've put it into your pocket in a way that you're on the subway, service cuts out, and you're constantly refreshing. Do you know what I mean? The average sound bite has gone from 60 seconds to a handful of seconds. The way a page loads, if it takes too long, if you are on a page for longer than a second plus, you just start hitting refresh or you just go to something else. Where does the agitation come from? Immediate gratification from unhealthy modes of dopamine. The presence satisfies the way you need caffeine when you have fasted all day. You need a cigarette if you're addicted to nicotine. You need the outward jolt to bring you to a sense of balance. You want to have it in healthy doses, not unhealthy doses. Serotonin is a chemical that's released in relation to status, loyalty, and achievement. And when you have a curated lifestyle that is built on making you hate yourself, you don't know how to celebrate what you bring that's good in your life. You need a constant source of validation from others, as opposed to learning how to hug yourself once in a while and be in a place where you say, I got that for me because I did something good today. Do you know? So people will like ask me, is it hard? Is it tiring? Who chaplains the chaplain? Right? Sometimes when I feel like we've done something good as a community, I'll go and I'll eat a piece of candy. And why am I eating the piece of candy? Because I'm saying, good job, Khalid. Right? And you can say, is that really something you need to do? When was the last time you felt proud of yourself? Not arrogant, but when was the last time you felt like you were actually something worth something? And if I asked all of you to pull out a piece of paper and write down all the things you hate about yourself, dislike about yourself, flaws in yourself, you probably couldn't stop writing stuff. If I asked you to tell me what was wrong with other people, you probably would just keep telling me stuff. If I asked you to write down what makes you beautiful, what do you like about yourself, it's going to be a harder task. Why? Not unhealthy like. I like the way I look when I look at myself in the mirror, right? That's a positive unless it's rooted in something that's like you're full of yourself, God forbid. Do you know what I mean? Right? So in this vein, one of these things is about setting objectives and goals, but recognizing where does unhealthy validation versus healthy validation come from. A third prism in which we can understand this is rooted in endorphins. These are like happy jolts that come from like physical exercise as well as acts of kindness, right? So exercise, not by a default, like some of us just get in steps because we live in New York City. Some of us work jobs that make us sedentary in unhealthy ways, right? And think about why someone doesn't come here. I was just too tired to come. It was too much work to come. Like, yes, you have to get up off your butt to walk to the masjid to get the benefit of the hadith that says when you go to the masjid in a state of wudu, every step elevates you in rank and diminishes in degree like a misdeed, right? But the laziness is easier. It's not better. Do you know? And the action in and of itself is something that if you were to encapsulate what exercise does for your body and what it does for your wellness into a pill, it would be the most successful pill sold on the market. Do you know what I mean? And all of it gets connected. I can't get up because I'm too busy staring at this thing. Do you know? When you engage in acts of generosity and kindness, it releases the same stuff that exercise does. And that's not just kindness to someone else, it's kindness back to me. Right? La taghdab. Isn't it a lot easier to get angry when in between most of your thoughts are you hating on you? La taghdab. Do not get angry. Meaning, do the things that enable you to be on a different trajectory. Forbearance, generosity, compassion, kindness. How much of your day are you deliberately engaged in this? الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. The merciful one is merciful to those who are merciful. Be merciful on the earth. The one who is in the heavens will be merciful to you. Meaning, go live mercy. Who benefits from it the most? You benefit from it the most. But if you think significance is attached to consumption in an unhealthy way rather than contribution, where I think I'm only good based off of my significance stemming from what I buy, versus I contribute because I already believe I have something of value to share, and then I'll go and give that back, and it'll increase me in self-esteem, which will help me to treat myself well because I see myself well. And then anger won't be the default reaction because I've dealt with this in a different mode. I populate my day by not avoiding what is wrong. I fill it with what is right. The Prophet ﷺ is a balanced person, not only indicative from the fact that he smiles at people, he pays attention to people, he empathizes with people, but when he does these things, there's signs of balance as well as the factors that create balance. Do you see? Does that make sense? And the abhorrent, atrocious, unhealthy, vengeful, toxifying anger that when the companion comes in this hadith, Awsini ya Rasulallah, give me advice, O Messenger of God. La taghdab, don't get angry. And then he asks again, La taghdab, don't get angry. If you're not doing that, you're doing this other stuff. Oxytocin is a happy chemical that comes out when we feel loved. So when you have someone in your life that needs to hear from you that you love them, then you tell them you love them. Physical contact is an important variable to this. If you are blessed with people in your life that you are supposed to hug, don't go up to random people at the end of this and say, hey, sister, Khalid told me I got to hug people. That's not what I'm saying, right? The people that Allah has permitted for you to do that to. Do you get what I mean? How many Muslims did we pray Eid with in the park? 6,000, 7,000? Some of you were there, right? How many of those 7,000 people do you think only get hugged by their family members on the day of Eid? I would argue probably a lot of them. A lot of them probably only get hugged by their family members on the day of Eid. Some of you only get hugged by your family members on the day of Eid. Some of you only hug people on the day of Eid. Some of you don't even do that. There's wisdom that the Prophet told his grandchildren that he loved them, that he told his companions that he loved them, that he told Mu'adh ibn Jabal when he is leaving, and he says that this might be the last time that we see each other. In that same conversation, that he says that by Allah, O Mu'adh, I love you. And the same can apply back to the self. When you engage in generosity, compassion, you engage in goodwill, you engage in what our tradition tells us to engage in, not in self-centered behavior or egocentric behavior, but God-centric behavior. In between, this is what la taghdab means. So that same chemical that's released from if Hussam and I hugged each other, like meaningfully, not awkwardly, but meaningfully, the same way that me and he acknowledging each other in that moment, you can also release that same thing by engaging in an act of just genuine altruistic kindness towards somebody, generosity and compassion. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? This is why a lot of our volunteers are happy in Ramadan, because they're in service of people. And if it's not a part of what you do with regularity, la taghdab is going to be harder to abide by. It's just going to come up with more ease, like the manifestation, because you're taking it on not in a multi-pronged approach, but with singularity. Does that make sense? Okay. Maghrib is going to come in like right now. So let's take a pause. We're going to have iftar. If you're fasting, there's dates there. Maybe people could pass out the dates. We're not going to continue after Maghrib with the dars. We said a few weeks ago, we'll stop at Maghrib time. so people can kind of be in community with each other. So if you weren't fasting today, or you were fasting today, stick around after, like eat with each other. This is ways to also counter some of what this is like we're talking about, right? You're with people, you're releasing like negative by engaging in positivity. But we'll pick up from here next week, inshallah. So people want to move their chairs to the wall. And if someone can call the adhan, we'll take a pause here.